The deepest hole in the world is currently the Kola Super Deep Borehole in Russia. Started in 1970, it was the result of a scientific project to drill as deep into the Earth's crust as possible. While the Soviet scientists working on the project didn't meet their original 15,000 meter target, the hole does reach an impressive 12,262 meters into the crust, when temperatures became so high that the scientists were forced to abandon the project altogether. At this depth into the crust, temperatures reached around 180 degrees Celsius, and the Soviet scientists reported the 2.7 billion year old rocks behaving almost like plastic, which deformed the drill bits and made any further drilling impossible. The drilling ceased in 1982, and the site was abandoned around a decade later, and so all that remains now is an abandoned Soviet workstation. Since 1989, the hole remains as the deepest point on Earth ever made by humans. The hole is so deep that some even claim that it reaches down to hell, and that if one listens close enough, one can hear the screams of the damned. Tangents aside, this leads us to a question. What exactly are holes? Holes are, scientifically, strange little bastards. In ordinary language, we talk about holes much like we talk about any other object. Holes in Swiss cheese, holes in buckets, and holes in my heart that I attempt to fill with drugs and self-deprecating humour. We also talk about holes in order to explain certain things. The water leaked out from the bucket because the bucket contained a hole. Clearly, we have the impression of seeing holes, and we have a concept in language that corresponds with this impression. In some languages, there are even words which pick out different types of holes, hollows or cavities or perforations. If we asked anyone what a hole was, then we'd likely receive a similar answer from most people. And this seems like a good reason to suggest that holes exist in the world as we think they do. However, a closer philosophical examination might show that holes don't really exist at all, and that we've made them up as a convenient fiction. So in this video, let's waste some of our valuable time with the strange philosophy of holes. If holes actually exist, then we'd expect them to have spatio-temporal properties like any other object. In other words, we expect holes to have a size, shape, and location. These are necessary criteria for all physical objects, and what differentiates them from more abstract entities like numbers and morality. If this is true, and holes actually have such properties, then we have no problem. However, this would also make holes unlike any other object we know about, for one simple reason. Holes seem to be made of nothing. The hole might have other physical stuff around it, like a donut, or it might have something that fills it, like water in a bucket, but the hole itself doesn't seem to be made of anything. This is where the problems start, and where the philosophers have something to sink their vampiric teeth into. If holes really are made of nothing, then this creates a number of conundrums, and these are the topic for today's video. And before we begin, I must stress, these are real philosophers working on these very real and important issues. Whoever said philosophy was a useless subject? These are the real questions that need answering. The first problem comes with how we can actually perceive holes. According to the philosopher John Locke, perception relies on causation. In other words, objects in the world have certain material properties which cause our perceptions of them. If I perceive a table to have a certain size and shape, this is because the table has the material properties of being a certain size and shape. However, holes have no such properties because they're made of nothing, so it's a puzzle how we can perceive them at all. Unless we want to reject the standard causal theory of perception altogether, it seems as though when we perceive a hole, it's something of an illusion as to how we come to do so. Second, it's rather difficult to come up with any criteria as to what a hole actually is. If holes really are made of nothing, then we can't point to any material stuff in order to identify what they are. But we also can't point to anything surrounding the hole in order to explain it either, because this is different from the actual hole itself. If we imagine the hole in a donut, we can change the donut by taking a bite, but this presumably wouldn't change the hole. Similarly, we can remove the water from the hole in the bucket, and it would still be a hole. So this creates an admittedly ridiculous problem for philosophers. If we can't look to the hole itself or anything that the hole exists in for its identity criteria, then how can we even come to know what holes are in the first place? Third, and most strange, there's a difficulty in what's called the mereology of holes, which is all about the relationships between the parts of things. We can demonstrate this with a simple experiment. Imagine that I aim a gun at Richard Dawkins and miss, hitting the wall behind him and creating a hole. There's now one hole in the wall, that's simple enough. But imagine that I aim for him a second time and miss again, creating another hole. What do we have now? It would seem like we have two holes, since two bullets went through the wall instead of Richard Dawkins' face. But it could also be that it's a single hole made from two disconnected parts. Just have a look at the intense debate online as to whether a plastic straw has one hole or two. The correct answer, of course, is to not use plastic straws and to switch to a more environmentally forward drinking instrument. Tangents aside, the mereological status of holes is something rather difficult to account for. So, we have holes in Swiss cheese, 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire, and various issues with our common conception about holes and their properties. If you've made it this far into a video problematizing the metaphysical status of holes, then I salute you, and you probably deserve some answers. Philosophers have come up with several ideas about what the metaphysical status of holes might be, but as with most things in philosophy, there's very little consensus about which theory is actually correct. On the one hand, we could bite the bullet and argue that holes actually don't exist. What we're really talking about is holed objects. Holes aren't really things in themselves, and all our sentences about the existence of holes can be rephrased into sentences which are used for the same purpose, but lack the implication about their actual existence. Basically, hide them under a philosophical rug. On the other hand, we could argue that holes are real things, but in reality are nothing over and above the spatio-temporal coordinates in which they're found. Note that this is different to the claim that holes are just areas of space, because areas of space on their own can't move. We need to include a time component to ensure that when we move a donut from the donut box and into our donut orifice, the hole moves with it and isn't left behind in the box. On yet another hand, we could argue that holes are a negative part of their positive material hosts. To return to our mereological donut, this would entail that the donut is composed of a positive dough and a negative hole, which would make it a strange sort of thing indeed, unlike anything else we know. To summarize, philosophers have argued back and forth, but none of them really has a bloody clue what a hole actually is. It's such a weird and ridiculous idea that something we're surrounded with all the time has such a debatable philosophical status. Ah well, it's off to the questionable entities games with them. As for this video, that's several minutes of your life wasted. I know what you're thinking. This was a really unsatisfying conclusion to a video on a really boring topic. Thank you very much for watching, peace and love, and I'll see you in the next video.